Joining us now on POTUS is a return guest, Representative Rob Andrews, who represents the 1st Congressional District in New Jersey. Thank you for being here. Welcome back to POTUS.
Good morning, Tim.
You're a lawyer. I mean, you spent a lot of time. You have a law degree from Cornell. You were at the Cornell Law Review. You worked at the Rutgers University School of Law. What do you make of the last couple of days that you've seen at the Supreme Court?
I make that people exaggerate the effect of oral arguments. They're important, but I think the justices are going to look at these issues in their chambers and have their debates and their conferences and come to some resolution. I'm hopeful that the resolution will be in favor of upholding the law for the following reason. The truly conservative position here is to defer to the judgment of the elected branches of government. Marbury versus Madison doesn't say that the Supreme Court has the exclusive power to define the Constitution. It sometimes defers in that power to the elected branches. In a close case like this, the truly conservative judgment would be to defer to the wishes of elected people and let 130 million voters decide this question in November rather than 9 justices in June.
You made the point that, and that's the exact same point that Justice Kennedy made yesterday, is that typically the case says that maybe we have a fundamental change in the relationship between the government and the individual. He also did say he understands some of it. I want to get to your point, which is that the oral arguments do not have much of an influence, and that's something I've heard a lot of legal scholars talk about, and that is, a couple of times maybe an attorney or a justice will change his or her mind after the oral arguments. They're also, I think, equally unresponsive to protests and a lot of the sort of Sturm und Drang that we see on the cable talk shows. So what is this all about? What people are protesting and what we're all doing? Is this about political pressure being brought to bear on the different parties?
I think so. I think that people want to create an environment for the court to make this decision. And at the end of the day, I think that Justice Kennedy and to a great extent Chief Justice Roberts are going to make a decision about the institutional meaning of this decision for the Supreme Court. In other words, this is more than just about the definition of the commerce power or the fate of the Affordable Care Act. It's really about the role the court plays in the American constitutional system. And I think that those two who are conservatives in an institutional jurisprudential sense might well vote to uphold the law, not because they love it or would have voted for it, but because they understand the court's role.
Representative Rob Andrews is with us, Democrat from New Jersey. So assume that this is held unconstitutional. Is that better or worse for the president heading into 2012?
I have no idea. Mm-hmm. Because we don't really know what the circumstances would be. I've heard 2 arguments. The one is it would be good for the president because the Democratic base, which supports this law, would be deeply offended that in a decision reminiscent of Gore versus Bush, that we had a 5-4 vote in the Supreme Court that subverted the will of the voters. I think that would generate a lot of activity in the Democratic base, maybe higher voter turnout. On the other hand, I've heard the argument that independent voters who are crucial to the election would, somehow doubt the president more because the court had found his signature achievement to be unconstitutional. I really have no idea. And I'll tell you what, the fact that you're asking that question, which is a very legitimate one, is the thing that I think will weigh heavily on the minds of the justices. That do they really want 5 months before a presidential election to significantly influence the outcome? Now, maybe they do. Maybe they do. But I think the true conservatives on the court will not want to.
Well, the other side of that is that from what you're saying and from what I'm hearing from others, too, there's no understanding exactly what kind of effect it might have. It could be good for the president, could be bad. Could be good for Republicans, could be bad. So maybe their decision is just purely a constitutional question and it's going to be absent politics because it's unclear what effect that decision might have, regardless of which way they decide.
Well, but I think although we don't know the discrete impact on the election, we know it will have a huge impact on the election because it'll be such a major issue. And the court, I don't think, wants to be thrust into that spotlight in the middle of a bitterly contested campaign. And I don't think the framers wanted that either.
But aren't they by virtue of the timing? I mean, they're going to be thrust in it anyway, right? I mean, the decision's going to come out in June sometime.
Well, I mean, the sleeper issue here may be the Injunction Act issue was argued on Monday.
Right. Whether or not it's even something they have to wait until the tax actually goes into effect.
It's a hyper-technical argument, but the general rule in this country when you're arguing about a tax is you pay it first and then sue for a refund.
Right. And
because the individual mandate penalty/tax doesn't go into effect until 2014, there's a good argument here this is all premature. And it also fits nicely with the notion the voters are going to be the arbiters of this law. If President Obama is reelected, this law is here to stay. If Mr. Romney is elected, then I think it'll be repealed. And I think that maybe the justices would rather have that controversy dealt with in a political venue rather than a legal one.
Well, talk from a more practical standpoint then. Again, Representative Rob Andrews with us on POTUS. Assuming, again, let's talk about whether or not if it is found unconstitutional, that does not necessarily mean the whole law will be thrown out. What then becomes a solution? And is there a way that Republicans and Democrats can work together to find either a way to fund this or to rework the legislation that will somehow attack the rising cost of health care in this country if this particular law is found to not meet the constitutional test?
Well, the first question you ask, I think, is the important one, that if a part of the law is struck down but not all of it, what do we do? And that's a much more manageable problem. If the whole thing is struck down, then I think you have to start from scratch, which would, I think, be terrible. Keep in mind, Tim, that we're going to have the most productive lame duck session, I think, in the modern history of the Congress, because there are 4 huge questions that will have to be dealt with before the end of the year. The expiration of the Bush tax cuts, the looming defense sequesters on January 1st, no doubt passing an omnibus budget for the rest of the year, and then extending the debt ceiling. So
and also the extension of the payroll tax holiday, or just letting that go by the wayside also.
Well, that's correct. So there's 5 monumental issues that the Congress and the President will deal with. If the President's reelected, his leverage during that period, I think, will be very substantial. And I think any fix that would be necessary in the health care bill could be achieved during that period. Now, if it's an entire rewrite, no, it can't be done in that kind of period of time, nor should it be.
What's the solution to the mandate if that's the only thing that goes away?
I haven't thought specifically about that. I do know this.
Because Congress could impose a medical tax if they wanted to, right? If you wanted to do, I don't know if there'd be political will for that, but it is a possibility.
I would assume that is correct. I think that's beyond constitutional question as well. And I do know this, the markets won't work if everyone has to be insured at uniform rates, but everyone doesn't have to participate. The prices will skyrocket. It won't work. So the individual mandate is critical to the operation of the exchanges, the new marketplace. And by the way, it really comes down to personal responsibility here. What this is really all about. If a person chooses not to buy insurance because they'd rather buy a motorcycle or have a nicer apartment, and they get sick or they get hurt, and they go to the emergency room, should their neighbors pay their bill, or should they be responsible for paying their bill? That's what this question is about. And I think that in terms of the principle of personal responsibility, the individual mandate is the right thing to do, which is what Newt Gingrich used to say, and Mitt Romney used to say, and Bill Frist, and Chuck Grassley, and a lot of other principled conservatives.
We will let it go at that because there are a lot of questions yet to be answered. Congressman Rob Andrews, thanks for being here. Always welcome on the program.
My pleasure, Tim. Thank you.